we have to share. And therefore, the powers of the Committee of Environment can be devolved, Mr. President, as the powers of executive are devolved in the local government.
I will write the appropriate committee heads, Mr. President, regarding your suggestion, and will request the Majority Leader to convene the Committee on Rules to tackle the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your support. Again, to my co-green warrior and defender of the environment and indigenous people's rights, I thank you for your intervention.
Senator Mix.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. President. May the lady from the Senator of the Republic allow me to ask a few questions?
Very willingly, Mr. President, to the soon-to-be holder of a masteral course on environment studies from UP Los Baños, and to the true, genuine agriculturist of the Senate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I appreciate the kind words the lady has given me, who will be my colleague, I think my classmate as well, hopefully very soon, on the same masteral, it's Masters of Environment and Natural Resources Management.
Yes, Mr. President.
So
if I'm not old enough to apply as a student in the UP Los Baños.
Absolutely not, Mr. President. The lady looks even much younger than many women in college today. Mr. President.
I haven't expressed a hearty laugh like that in a long time.
Mr. President, yes. Actually, it's not. I'm not here to interpolate the lady from Antique. It's actually in support. The questions that I may ask will actually be in support of the measure of the lady from Antique, Mr. President, because really she has brought again into light. She's brought into light the problem of global warming, which sometimes, you know, we are overtaken by different crises. We are in right now a food and fuel crisis, and people have again forgotten the problem of global warming, climate change, which we are experiencing to this very moment, Mr. President. You know, we thought that it would be the advent of the rainy season. Actually, Pag-asa declared an early entry of the wet season last May, middle of May. And now, Mr. President, it's gotten warm. And we're looking maybe at the prospect of another El Nino for the next few weeks. So this has disrupted the planting patterns of many of our farmers, because they thought if they started planting 2 weeks ago and you will have about 2 to 3 weeks of delayed rain, you actually, it does actual damage to the crops. And so these are things, concrete, how do you say, concrete manifestations of climate change, Mr. President. Would the lady agree with me?
You're very correct, Mr. President. The long droughts, the early rains, or rains where there should be no rains. I would recall last year from May, June, and July, there was a longer than usual dry season. And earlier this year in January, February, there was still rainy season at the beginning of the year. These are manifestations of change in our climate. These affects, of course, the days of celebration, harvesting of our farmers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I believe, Mr. President, that the speech of Senator Legarda is very timely, because really the Philippines should take a lead. And I think the lady from Antique, the Senator of the Republic, agrees with me that we should take a lead in this fight against global warming, because we are the most prone to this, to climate change.
Being an archipelago.
That's correct. Yes,
and
Mr. President.
I don't have the exact number, but we have so many coastal barangays, coastal municipalities, Mr. President, that should be prepared for any eventuality, God forbid, of any tsunami,
Yes.
any tidal waves.
Yes, Mr. President. As a matter of fact, the joke is that during low tide, we are 7,100 islands. During high tide, we are 7,000 islands. So we lose 100. That is on low tide and high tide. Only imagine if what would happen if there would be an increase in the water level of the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea by 0.5 meter. We will probably lose Malabon, Navotas.
That's where I'm from, Mr. President, Navotas and Malabon.
Can you imagine?
Perhaps that is why I'm so concerned about flooding and rising water levels because I grew up playing with the bangus and tilapia in my backyard whenever it was rainy season, and it would be common fare for us to step out of our front doors and play in the flooded waters.
That's correct, Mr. President. And my worry is one day, Malabon, Navotas, including Manila, the Bay
Including
Area,
Dagupan, Mr. President.
Dagupan may become the new Venice, the Venice of Asia. Unfortunately, we may not be so lucky. That will be a massive displacement of several communities, and something that we probably will not be prepared to cope with in the near future. And so I believe, Mr. President, the Philippines should be in the forefront in fighting global warming, and the President of the Republic, including her cabinet, should be in all international conferences appealing to the world to hasten the entry of renewables, as well as to slow down in its emissions, carbon emissions, because really the Philippines should be the poster boy. And unfortunately, I think we lack in that department. Would the lady agree with me, Mr. President?
Definitely, Mr. President. That is the reason why there is a need for such a commission to address these very important issues. And you mentioned earlier about the flooding of certain areas. I think one country, it's a very small island country, Vanuatu, I don't know if they call it a town, but one area, Vanuatu, they really had to relocate the whole village already because the rising water level has flooded the whole town. That is an example of what could happen in our country. I also, yes, if I may just finish, Mr. President, your suggestion for the national government to take in its reins this issue of global warming is so important and so urgent. And I think that each department of our government, public works, agriculture, environment, should be climate proofed. Everything should have a climate proofing component so that all the projects, whether it's in roads and highways or whether it's in irrigation facilities if you're in the agriculture, but everyone should, whether you're in housing, everything should have green technology, should be climate proof so that you could, all the efforts should be coordinated, and this can only be done if there is a commission that will be advised by technical experts and scientists who understand the issues of climate change and global warming.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, and I thank the lady from Antique, Malabon, and Navotas for that information. But even closer to our hearts, Mr. President, the lady mentioned Vanuatu, was it?
Vanuatu.
Vanuatu. Closer to our hearts is the island of Boracay.
Oh yes.
I was there
I'm
on
glad
the
you
first
mentioned
week.
that.
Yes, I was there, Mr. President. This is very important, Mr. President. I was there for a wedding on the first week of May 3 to be exact. And I was so shocked. I've been there. I've been going to Boracay every year for 7 years, Mr. President, to celebrate our New Year's with the family. I was so shocked of my last visit to Boracay when I noticed that the water level has reached the doorstep of the resorts. Or during high tide. It was never that way before, Mr. President. It would only reach probably 20 feet to the doorstep or the entrance or the property line of the resort. Now they have to build. They have to build a seawall where we walk on top of, just to go from one resort to the other. This is beachfront property. That's why there was, Mr. President, a statement coming from the DNR that all these resorts are in violation of our Constitution, because they say that under the Constitution, the highest level, water level, 20 meters of that is still government or public domain, in which any fisherman or any person can still walk there. But now it has already flooded. My goodness, so maybe we should tell the DNR it's not the fault of the resorts, but it's the fault of global warming, why the water level has risen that high. But I'm just citing, Mr. President, a very, very, very specific example, and people can even do features on this. Actually, I'm hoping that the media...
That's very interesting, Mr. President. And just to back up your on-the-ground example, with some scientific facts, Mr. President, what is the impact of climate change on human settlements or on resorts, as you mentioned? In the past 100 years, global sea level